Thank you, Robin, for the introduction, and a warm welcome again from me to all of you, whether you are connecting on our virtual platforms or you're here in the room with us today. It is a great pleasure to have you as our audience for this very interesting innovations dialogue on deepfakes. We have quite a detailed and packed agenda for the day. You have it on your desk, or you can see it on screen or on our website. Basically, as Robin said, it is the agenda today will cover different aspects related to deepfakes. We will start by trying to get a solid understanding of what the technology is, and with that, what kind of risks, but also what kind of opportunities are available to us. It is important that we consider also the way in which technology can be leveraged for good and can be leveraged to counter misuses of deepfakes. The primary focus of the morning will be on risks and threats, trying to understand them from an international security perspective, while in the afternoon we will pivot and focus more on responses, whether there are technical responses to the phenomenon or governance responses to the phenomenon. Just a note of caution, of course, the concept of deepfakes is really rooted in hyper-realistic scientific media. So you will see over the course of several presentations, demonstrations of the technology that will include simulation of real people, whether they are celebrities from the entertainment, the sport industry, or political leaders. We couldn't really, our speakers couldn't really give you a sense of what the technology is without using reality as a training ground. So please bear with them as they will run you through several examples and consider them to be simply illustrative of what the technology can do. I just wanted now to explain how you can all engage with us in the discussion over the course of the day. You can do that virtually using the Slido platform. People in the room have the QR code on the desk, or you can scan it directly from the screen, or you can just go on slide.do and insert the code ID2021. You can submit your questions or comments there, and they will be available to the moderators that will then share the questions with our speakers. If you're in the room with us, you're also invited, if you prefer, to take the floor personally. There are 2 microphone stations at the far end of the room. You're very welcome to walk to one of them and take the floor. It is important that if you choose this option, you speak in the microphone so that our audience online can hear your question as well. Well, our audience and our speakers online can hear you as well. Now, without further ado, I think it's time to get into the substance and introduce our keynote speaker, Nina Schick, that I believe is already connected with us. So welcome, Nina. Nina Schick is the director of Tamang Ventures. She is an author, an advisor, and an expert speaker who specializes in how technology is transforming geopolitics and society. And she's going to help us setting the scene for today's discussion. I can see you online, Nina. Welcome again. And over to you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Giacomo, for that kind introduction. And thank you, everyone, for being at the Innovations Dialogue today. The topic I'm covering today, actually the whole theme of the conference today, is so pertinent to the future of geopolitics, and in particular, with regards to the question of the future of trust and international security going forward. And really that is because we are at the cusp of an AI-led revolution that is not only going to change the way that humans do commerce and communicate in the future, but it's also going to change the way that humans think about what's real or not. This will have significant geopolitical implications, especially again when it comes to those key questions of trust and international security. Now, this AI revolution starts with something that's more commonly known as a deepfake. You might have already heard the word, you've seen it on the agenda for today's program. But what it is essentially is a piece of so-called synthetic or fake media that's either been manipulated or created entirely from scratch by artificial intelligence. So synthetic media can come really in the form of any form of digital content, whether that's text, images, video, or audio. This really incredible ability of AI to create fake media is a cutting-edge development. It's only been within the realm of the possible for the last 5 years or so, thanks to the so-called revolution in deep learning, which is taking artificial intelligence from the realm of science fiction into practical reality. And what it turns out that AI is particularly good at is at creating fake or synthetic media of people. So look at each of these people, for instance, and I'm going to show you 3 faces. Can you tell which of these 3 was created by AI and actually does not exist? Make a mental note as I scroll through. So is it A, this boy, B, the woman, or C, the man? The boy, the woman, or the man? If you chose picture 1, the boy, you're right. However, if you chose B, the woman, or C, the man, you're right too. This is a quick question. None of these people exist. All of these are deepfake images generated by AI. But AI is also very good at making fake or synthetic media of people who do exist, because it can be trained to clone real people when it's given the right training data. So that means synthetically generated media, photos, videos, and audio of real people saying and doing things they never did. And that includes even if that person is already dead. Take the artist Salvador Dali. He's been dead for over 30 years, but there's something he wants to share with the innovations dialogue today.
But there is one thing that makes me different. I do not believe in my death. Do you?
So Dali does not believe in his own death, especially as AI can now make him say that. This is an entirely synthetic creation. It was trained on footage of Dali whilst he was still alive. Dali obviously never filmed this video. Now, if I hadn't told you, if I hadn't primed you and told you that the Dali video was fake, or indeed that those photos, quote unquote, of the people who don't exist were fake, could you have believed that they were real? And the answer is that many people would have, because as humans, we are wired to want to believe something that looks and sounds right. It's a cognitive bias, which is known as processing fluency. We want to trust what our eyes and ears are telling us as being true. So, of course, it should come as no surprise, especially in this forum with international security experts, that media manipulation has a very long and prolific history as a very powerful tool to shape the collective human perception. Of course, this precedes digital media and has always played a role in politics, helping to shape the geopolitical narratives. Here's one early example from the 19th century, which I love. In front of you, you see Abraham Lincoln, the US president, though an icon today. Interestingly, President Lincoln was actually beset by rumors of his ugliness during his lifetime. Lanky, ungainly, grotesque. These were all words that were used to describe his appearance whilst he was still alive. So after he was dead, assassinated, and it was time to mythologize him, one portrait creator got very creative. He superimposed a photograph of Abraham Lincoln's head onto an engraving of another politician, John C. Calhoun. Here you see the original engraving of John C. Calhoun. As you can see, he had the kind of presidential build and gravitas that the portrait creator wanted to have for Lincoln. So here you see the edited photograph on the left and the original engraving side by side. Now, to do this, it was painstaking work, and it took the portrait painter a number of months to do this, but it was done so well that it was only recently discovered as a manipulation, more than 100 years after the fact. Now, it's a really ironic twist of history that Lincoln was actually lionized on the body of Calhoun, given that the two were actually bitter rivals during their lifetime due to their opposing views on the abolition of slavery. But moving forward into the 20th century, here's another example, because another very keen proponent of visual manipulation was the Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. And as he had his enemies eliminated one by one in the kind of brutal purges, great purges of the 1930s, he simultaneously had them unpersoned or removed from photographs. Now, it was very difficult to do in those days. It took days of careful labor by a skilled artisan. And in fact, this practice was so commonplace under Stalinism that an entire cottage industry dedicated to the manipulation of the historical record via photography developed in those years. But what's happened since then is that modern technology is, of course, making media manipulation cheaper, easier, and more accessible. Just as the Soviet Union was collapsing in 1990, came the world's first widespread photo editing software, Photoshop. Everybody knows what that is. And since then, we've had photo editing smartphone apps, software that can synthesize music, Instagram video filters. And now we're entering a completely new and uncharted terrain in the age of deepfakes and synthetic media, which is a time when artificial intelligence will increasingly be able to generate all forms of digital content, the stuff that billions of us interact with on a daily basis. It's really important to understand that synthetic media represents a significant leap forward from what has come before. So I wouldn't classify deepfakes as just Photoshop 2.0. And this is really primarily for 4 reasons. The first is because the fidelity of synthetic media is unmatched. Humans will not be able to distinguish between authentic and synthetic media as the generation techniques become increasingly sophisticated. As we've seen, this generation ability includes fake media in which AI can actually clone human biometrics, right? Your voice, your face, your voice, your identity, which is uniquely your own. The second is that synthetic media moves beyond the mere manipulation of media. This is not just photo editing. This is not just adding a filter. This is actually being able to generate digital content that did not exist before from scratch, including, as we've seen, the generation of entirely synthetic humans. The third is that they extend beyond images, again, to both audio and video, as well as text. So AI can really already generate every single form of digital content. And 4, unlike even Photoshop, which requires some degree of skill and resource to operate well, this technology will become universally accessible for next to no cost via very easy to use interfaces as the AI improves in its generative capability. So as artificial intelligence does the heavy lifting, the creation and manipulation of all forms of digital media is being democratized in a way that's completely unprecedented. Once it's ubiquitous, and ubiquitous it will be, we will be facing one of the most dramatic revolutions in human communications in history, with, of course, huge implications on trust as well as international security. And it's happening really, really quickly. So here's a very interesting example. It's a benign one. And this is relating to the movie The Irishman. So in 2015, the legendary Hollywood director, Martin Scorsese, decided to bring together the old crew, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, et al., for another epic gangster film in The Irishman, right? And this plot spanned 7 decades. Now, Scorsese, not one to back down from a challenge, decided that what he wanted to do was de-age his protagonist for his 7-decade plot. To do so, he hired the best special effects artists, visual artists in Hollywood. He filmed with a awfully complicated 3-camera rig system. And he later complained that creating this movie, which he started work on in 2015, was a hellish endeavor. It cost millions of dollars, and it took years and years of hard work and post-production. You might have seen the movie when it came out on Netflix in 2019. And as a viewer, you might have had a similar reaction to mine, which was, interesting. Looks pretty good, but it's not entirely convincing. Now, if you fast forward to 2020, 12 months later, and one YouTuber decided to have a crack at the de-aging problem. He used free software, which was emerging from the AI research community. It cost him $0, and it took him a week to do. So let's see how the YouTuber's deepfake work compares to the Netflix original in this side-by-side comparison.
Bombing out a laundry place. I was just doing a job to make some extra money. Putting this place out of action. Putting this place out of commission.
So arguably, the YouTuber's work is much more convincing. Of course, he had a head start because he was working on Scorsese's edit. He wasn't starting from scratch, but still, this demonstrates the raw power of synthetic media. Of course, one of the main reasons the coming age of synthetic media can be interpreted as a seismic geopolitical event is because this is happening at a time when digital media is becoming the most important medium of human communication. Just to quantify that, think about this. Last year, we collectively as humanity took over 1.4 trillion photographs. If I were to take a photograph every second and I didn't stop, it would still take me 45,000 years to take 1.4 trillion photographs. By next year, video streaming and downloads will drive over 80% of internet traffic. And by 2023, 5.6 billion people, the majority of humanity, will not only be consuming, but also sharing and producing digital content online. Everybody is not only going to be a consumer of digital media, but a producer as well, even if we don't tend to think of ourselves as such. Moreover, data suggests that by the end of the decade, video will become the primary source of information for almost anyone, everyone. Of those of us who are already online, estimates suggest that 2/3, 67%, already go to video as their primary source of information. So the trends towards digital media are clear. Every single human being will soon interact with this content, share it, and make it themselves, probably every single day. And these trends are unfolding just at the moment when synthetic media is going to start to become ubiquitous in our information ecosystem. Here's an example of a deepfake that recently went viral in the wild, so to speak, because it emerged on TikTok, and it is of Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise, I say in brackets because it isn't, of course, actually Tom Cruise. It garnered headlines across the world. And you might have already come across this because this content is so good. And it was made, of course, not by a Hollywood studio, but by a single deepfake artist. Let's watch.
Hey, listen up, sports and TikTok fans. If you like what you're seeing, just wait till what's coming next.
Now, processing fluency tells you that that's Tom Cruise, but it's not. That is synthetic content. Before you start questioning every piece of media you interact with today, or even if I'm a deepfake, I should point out that it's still not as easy for just about anyone to create something as sophisticated as the Tom Cruise deepfake we just saw. That video was made by a very skilled deepfake artist who trained AI on training data of Tom Cruise for over 2 months. So that is not going to be within the realm of possible for everyone. And I should caveat that by saying yet. This technology is already certainly accessible to state actors and well-organized groups or individuals, but if you or I wanted to create a deepfake today with zero other skills or resources, it would probably look a little bit more like this.
Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien.
So I created that clip of me singing the iconic song by Edith Piaf using a very popular deepfake app. It is so basic in comparison to the Tom Cruise video, but it's still stunning to think that AI was able to generate this 10-second clip from a single still image that I uploaded into an app in my phone, and it did so in seconds. So it's no surprise that the deepfake app space is exploding. Millions of people are now starting to play with their own deepfake content. Here's another example of some recent viral deepfake content that you might have seen on social media.
Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and desert you, never gonna make you cry, never gonna say goodbye, never gonna tell a lie and hurt you.
So Jerome Powell, Janet Yellen, and Ben Bernanke, the incumbent and last two chairs of the Fed, singing that 80s banger, Rick Astley's hit, Never Gonna Give You Up, again, generated from 3 single images using an app into this funny and very shareable little meme that went viral on the internet. For now, deepfake apps are still limited in terms of their functionality, but it should be noted that this limited functionality only exists due to technical constraints rather than ethical concerns. And there's no doubt in my mind that these constraints will soon be evaporated as the technology advances. And the type of fidelity of content, like the Tom Cruise video, which now takes considerable skill to create, is something that will become increasingly accessible by easy-to-use interfaces like apps in the near future. So by 2030, or even sooner, we're looking at a scenario really where a single creator, a YouTuber or a TikToker will be able to make synthetic content that is just as good as, or even better than what a Hollywood studio can create today, even with their teams of special effects artists and multi-million-dollar budgets. We're also going to see the popularity and functionality of deepfake apps explode. One of the earliest of these is an app called reface.ai. If you have a teenager, you might have already played with this app. It's already become the #1 downloaded app in the App Store in the United States and 20 other countries around the world. And in its 18 months of existence, its users have already generated over 3 billion videos using this app. The third is, of course, that as AI gets better at creating synthetic media, all digital content, including video, will increasingly be made by machines, not humans. And that's not only going to impact international security, but the reality is that entire industries, from media to advertising, entertainment, marketing, communications, you name it, every single industry is going to be transformed as synthetic media increasingly becomes the norm. We're already starting to see early commercial applications of this synthetic feature. And this is one, again, a valid example which really caught my eye. It's called Messy Messages. It's a very clever campaign from UEFA and Lay's and a synthetic media startup actually based here in London called Synthesia, which came out earlier this year. It allowed fans to create personalized messages from the footballing legend Lionel Messi in 8 different languages. Now, this was all done with a few clicks on a website. And of course, this was done with Messi's consent, who allowed himself to be cloned in this way with AI. Now, I made this personalized Messi message from my brother, Michael, from my husband, James.
Hey, Michael, what's up? My friend James has invited us to watch the big game tomorrow. I hope I can make it. If I can't be there, enjoy the game. Ah, and don't forget to bring the snacks. Ciao.
So as expected, this campaign is already gathering tons of attention. It was hugely popular, getting a personalized looking message from Lionel Messi as though it was filmed on the smartphone in his kitchen onto your WhatsApp. It actually recently won a Cannes Lion, which is the equivalent of the Oscars of the world of advertising. So here's one estimate. Here's one prediction, which I have no doubt is going to come true very soon. And that is that the licensing of synthetic personas is going to become a big business. Bruce Willis just signed the sweetheart of sweetheart deals recently when he licensed his own deepfake persona to a Russian mobile carrier for an ad campaign. For Willis, it involved a big payday, one that he cashed in on for 0 hours of work. He didn't even need to go and do a single photo session because the creators of the synthetic content for the ad campaign basically were able to train AI on a data set of his old movies. So Willis didn't actually need to do any live work. So I think you can begin to understand just how profound synthetic media will become for the future of human commerce, communication, and perhaps also the implications that this will have on public trust and geopolitics. But just how quickly do you think this synthetic future is arriving? Well, according to some experts, 90% of video content online will be synthetically generated by the end of the decade. 90%. And some of those experts actually think that is going to be happening faster. They say 95% by 2025. So we'll hit more than 90% within 5 years. Now, that is a punchy stat, but the direction of travel is clear. There is no doubt in my mind that we are at the start of, as I mentioned, this AI-led paradigm change. And as I like to say, the future is synthetic. Now, the synthetic future is exciting, and we've touched upon some of those compelling case studies already. But of course, it holds risks too. Just like any other powerful technology of the exponential age, this technology is going to be an amplifier of human intention, both for good and bad uses. And there is no doubt that synthetic media will be used by malicious actors. It can, and actually already is, being weaponized. And that brings me to rule number 34. A meme of the internet, this rule states that if something exists, then there is pornography of it online, and there are no exceptions to this rule. This is certainly true of deepfakes, because deepfakes actually emerged in the form of non-consensual pornography at the end of 2017 first. Now, a few years on, the problem of deepfake pornography is a very serious one. By conservative estimates, the amount of deepfake pornography online is doubling every 6 months. And according to some estimates, there are already 180,000 deepfake pornography videos online. And actually, I think the number actually is far, far, far higher than that. And the troubling part of it, of course, going back to this unique ability of AI to clone real humans, is its non-consensual nature. When it comes to deepfake pornography, it's an undeniably gendered phenomenon. Women are almost universally the targets of deepfake porn. And really disturbingly, it's not only female celebrities who are the victims of deepfake porn, normal women, so your colleagues, your wife, your girlfriend, your daughter, increasingly have become the targets of deepfake porn. Very sadly, even minors are being targeted in this way now. And as disturbing as this phenomena is, to me, deepfakes are far bigger than a tawdry woman's issue. I think that the use of AI-made fake porn serves as an early indicator to illustrate how malicious AI can be employed as a mass tool of deception and disinformation. It's something that every organization, be they political or not, must register as a significant evolving threat, because every one of your employees could either be targeted by a deepfake or become the victim of a deepfake. And this is no longer an outside threat. In spring this year, the FBI put out an alert warning that deepfakes are the next big cyber risk. Their report, which is really interesting, goes into some detail on how they'll be used increasingly for spear phishing and sophisticated social engineering attacks. So already we're starting to see emergence, for example, of the use of deepfakes in state-sponsored disinformation campaigns. But in the context of international security and trust, deepfakes are already doing untold damage even before they become ubiquitous. And this is precisely because they are so corrosive to the notion of trust. Think about it. If all digital media can be faked, including video, which so far we've kind of tended to see almost as an extension of our own perception, which is why video evidence, for example, is so compelling in a court of law. So if all digital media can be faked, including video, then everything can be dismissed as fake, even if it's not. Now, this is a phenomenon known as the liar's dividend, and we're already starting to see it at play. Increasingly, authentic content is being decried as deepfake. And I saw a really alarming example when I wrote my book last year with regards to the George Floyd death video. Now, we've recently reached the 1-year anniversary of his death, but we all know that that video was so visceral. It was so powerful that it unleashed a movement of protest, not only in the United States, but all around the world. So it united millions of people together in protest. But even I was surprised at how quickly that video was dismissed as a deep fake, and by a very unlikely candidate too. Dr. Winnie Hartstrong, a PhD holding African-American woman who is standing actually in 2020 to be elected to the US House of Representatives, released a 23-page academic report into why the whole George Floyd video was a deepfake hoax. In it, she argued that George Floyd had actually died in 2016. And the man we see in the video is the former NBA player, Steven Jackson, whose face had been swapped to appear like George Floyd in this AI-generated synthetic creation. Now, while Hartstrong's theory did not enjoy widespread support in 2020, and she was really campaigning for this theory. I mean, she was on podcast, she released a report, she had a whole website dedicated to it. It was still, her theory was still contained because most people still believe that George Floyd did actually die in 2020. However, this incident is a warning of what is to come. Will such certainties hold true in the public's mind in 2030 or 2035, when our already corrupted and noisy information ecosystem is even more cacophonic with the emergence of synthetic media? So the synthetic future raises profound philosophical questions about how we interpret the nature of reality. And primarily, if there is no way to distinguish between the authentic and the synthetic, especially in the digital realm, a realm which we increasingly inhabit, then how will we know what's real? If synthetic media heralds another nail in the coffin of an objective shared reality, which is something that is already increasingly shaky in the age of information, or perhaps we could call it the age of disinformation, one can imagine how vast the geopolitical consequences may yet be. How can we ensure trust in human interactions that define commerce, politics, security, and society if we cannot establish some layer of universally held truths or realities? And I'd like to end with a broader point that is really driving the innovations dialogues. And that is one I think that we will be reflecting on over the course of the rest of the day. And that is that we are entering this era of profound technology-led transformation, of which the synthetic future is only one part. We will arguably experience more change in our lifetimes than has been experienced by the entirety of humanity that has come before us. The ramifications are vast, not only again in the context of international security, but really more broadly for the future of humanity. The only way we can begin to prepare is by understanding the enormity of the paradigm change that is underway, so that we can both harness the opportunities whilst containing the risks. In the context of deepfakes and synthetic media, this absolutely means building and adopting technical solutions as well as policy prescriptions to protect the integrity of our information ecosystem, including media provenance solutions, for example, or deepfake detection tools. We've only really scratched the surface, and I'm sure you'll go far deeper into some of these ideas throughout the rest of the day. But if you are interested, you may also pick up my book or listen to some of the conversations I've had with leading public intellectuals like Sam Harris or Andrew Yang to dig a little bit deeper. But in the meantime, it's been my absolute pleasure to be here, and I thank you for sharing your time with me today at the Innovations Dialogue. I hope you have a fruitful rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina, for this inspiring keynote speech that really helps us in setting the scene. And you've touched upon basically all of the individual themes that we're going to further analyze over the course of the day. And as you were talking, some questions started to come in. We won't have time now to address these questions, but I hope I'm going to leave them here for all of the moderators of the following sessions, because I think that these questions are really getting to the core of the problem here, and they're going to be answered, I hope, over the course of the day. Things like, is AI going to make our lives more fake than social media and editing already do? Or are deepfakes conceptually different from just a shocking real video? Or again, is there any research available to suggest that deepfakes have been able to entrench existing fault lines in society and have consequently posed a security threat? All these are very good questions that we're going to unpack over the course of the day with the help of our expert speakers, but definitely what Nina helped us understand is that the potential harm here that could be generated by deepfakes is really a multi-layer and type of harm. It can harm individuals. It can harm societies by undermining the trust between people and their governments and the institutions. And it can undermine international relations by polluting, if you want, the information space that is then used to make decisions at the international level and really poisoning, if you want, relationship between decision makers. If we take a closer look at the military decision making, of course, the information space is a key enabler of military decisions. What happens when you start feeding into that same information space that is used by military leaders fabricated media and manipulated media? So these are all really good questions that we're going to explore further during the day. Allow me to thank you again, Nina, for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.